Okay, I'll forget it then. So sorry about that, guys. It looks like I'll have to do without the slides, and we'll just have to go on with it. I hope everyone's okay with that. So, counter number one, is that a warm up? Yes, 100%. It's a warm up. So cool. So to give a little bit of background today, I have. I guess what's the best way to start since I don't have the slides to show? I would say that the biggest question I have that I would be exploring in this talk today with you guys, especially, it's about why is empathy important for teams. Oh, thanks guys. A lot of people are offering to share slides. Oh, I can use the whiteboard behind me. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point, but that's very small. And the main question and the main reason why I want to explore empathy with and why I asked that question, two things, right? One, I love microdoses of existential crisis, especially for my own work. But secondly, also because I feel like it's a very important thing. Background is that I'm not actually an agilist. I've only been familiar with it for a year, 2 years or so, and I joined the closest I got was joining an agile coaching retreat last year in KL, and that's how I got introduced to the whole craft and also the whole career of it. And I think what really struck me was that that's where I learned the term team coaching. And that's also what taught me, oh, okay, so this is something like the work we've done is something that a lot of people are interested, a lot of people are excited about. And I think why I asked this question as well is because my working experience growing up has not exactly been very empathetic. Right? And I remember this because when I was 15 or 16, when I got my first job at Pizza Hut as a waiter, I remember during the first week of working there, my manager came up to me. So the context was that I was addicted to gaming when I was younger, very much. And on that day, I had a losing streak for Dota, the first Dota, because that's how old I am. and because I was playing the game, I was having a losing streak. It was a competitive game, so I went to work with a very, very sour face, just looking off and really angry at everyone. So my manager knows that I'm not okay. Like, she knows that I'm probably in a bad mood. But within the first hour, I remember her pulling me aside and just telling me, Shawn, I don't know what happened to you, but I don't care. I pay you to wait tables and I pay you to work. So I would appreciate if you leave all the problems at home, and when you come to work, you just focus on work, right? And that's it. And I think that experience has really struck me ever since then, because I don't know about other cultures, but I know that I'm from Malaysia, so it's a very Asian culture. So every boss I've had since then, ranging from doing promoter jobs, selling condoms and cereal, to working as an event booth contractor, working at an internship, all of them say the same thing, right? Along the lines of, whatever happens at home, it doesn't matter. There's an emergency, my car broke down. Doesn't matter, you still have to be on time for work. And I think that's what really, and why I talk about this also, because last month, when I gave this exact same talk as well, to the Agile C community gathering, that was the week, that's just 1 week before then, so it was like 2 months ago, one of our latest hires broke down during retrospective. So I remember very well, because we were having retrospective and we could see she was very similar to me, was having a very sour face. And then we asked, hey, what's wrong? And what happened was that person then broke down crying. And she said, just feeling very overwhelmed. There's a lot of responsibilities, both personally, professionally. It's her first job. So there was a lot of things going on for her. Right. And I think when that happened, immediately this brought me back to my own experience, right? And that's why I guess the biggest problem, I had this illustration, thanks to my girlfriend. She drew all the slides for me, that wrote very nicely, which is very, very promptly wrote, we can bring work shit home, but not bring shit from home to work. Right? And I think what I mean by that is that it's very common nowadays with the pandemic, COVID-19, we're all working from home, right? So, what are boundaries anyway, right? If you need to get shit done, you're just working at 11 or 12, which I have just last night, right? Working at 11, 12 a.m. at night time, just because you need to get shit done. The deadlines are tomorrow, you need to get things done. But let's say, when shit happens at home, and we all know shit will always happen, like it or not. Whatever happens, an emergency, things we don't plan for it, right? No one plans for no one plans for sick leave, unless that person's really, really good at fortune telling. But what really happens was that in the case that anything happens to us emotionally, we can never really show that at work. There's a certain level of acceptance and a certain level of or range, like it or not, that I feel we all believe. And assumptions, the very heavy assumption we have, that being at work, there's only acceptable range of there's acceptable range of emotions that you can show, right? It's kind of like an acceptable range, there are acceptable boundaries of what you can show in terms of your emotions. There is things that you can do, you cannot do, that, for example, things that you can express yourself and you can't express yourself, which becomes this kind of like duality. It's as if, I don't know if this happens for you guys, but I've had a lot of co-workers in Malaysia whereby in my past jobs, whereby when they go to work, they are very, very serious. Like they talk very robotic. They're like, okay, cool. But the moment the work ends and they go for beers or you go out to a bar, they're like a whole different person, they're like party animals. But at the workplace, they are just either very, very stoic, very emotionless, very almost to the point of like imperviousness, And I think that's something that it's very unrealistic nowadays. Work, I feel now has evolved to the sense that we put a lot of our identity into the work that we do, right? Like it or not, what nowadays we don't see work as just a 9 to 5. It's the way that we impact the world, the way that we give back. It's also part of how we think. We try to make change in the world, right? It's not just a salary, it's not just a 9 to 5 anymore. It carries very hard with us. It carries on with us, right? We feel, like it or not, nowadays work is like a big part of who we are. And I think because of that, work-life balance just becomes bullshit at that point. Because how do you navigate if work becomes such a heavy part of your identity? How do you navigate between that very fine line of what's personal and what's professional, what's acceptable and what's not? And to create that kind of space whereby we can accept each other and see each other as just human, really trying our best and doing what we want. And I think this kind of idea, right, whereby to create a workplace that's more human, is something that a lot of thought leaders now are really trying to push, right? The idea of vulnerability, psychological safety. And I think all of that just centers around the idea of the environment, meaning that instead of, it's all about creating a kind of environment that focuses on making people feel safe, feel seen, feel heard, making people feel like they belong in the workplace. And that's really at the core of it, right? Making people feel like they can belong, that it's something where they actually feel happy going to work, and then they feel like people there have their back, instead of having to worry like if anyone's gonna backstab me, how am I gonna climb the ladder? So I remember thinking about this very deeply and wondering, how do we figure it out? Or not, how do we navigate that inside our own team? Right? Because we've done this very instinctively as part of our values in Travelers, right? So I wondered, how do I visualize this? How do I show? How do we navigate between this balance? What's the framing that we have? So so I talked this out with the team, and we kind of, after bouncing it off, we kind of figured out a very simple kind of lens that we see it, that the way we kind of navigate this problem And I don't want to tell you, hey, here's what I think I wrote down clickbaity articles just to prove my point. Like what 3 ways to create belonging in your workplace, or top five ways to make to have safe conversations with your team. I don't know where that go. I think that was on the slides. Anyway, but I want to talk to you guys about a very simple way that we see it. It's not a solution, right? It's not a clear answer, but I hope at least it gives you a framing of, I hope that it gives you a little bit of framing of how we look at things. And that is through the lens of business needs and human needs. So let me just, since I do have the iPad with me, let me just show you. And yeah. And I call this the dichotomy of work, right? In a sense that when it comes to the things that we do at work, there are, or in any organization really, we have 2 needs that fall in. We have 2 kinds of needs, right? One is business needs, which is things like your cash flow, your revenue, staying competitive. Those are business needs. Then we also have human needs. Human needs being feeling, like I mentioned, the belonging, safety. There are times when business needs and human needs intersect, right? Like the green line that you can see over there. This is, I planned the whole like writing on a whiteboard kind of thing. Never mind that. Now, but what the green line kind of shows are when the intersections of business needs and human needs can be fulfilled together. And this is very clearly shown in how we reward our team right now. In the current environment, how we reward our team most of the times, or basically our teammates, is through money. And normally why is, or I mean not why, how is through promotions, right? Promotions, bonuses. Why is that? Simple, productivity. You do better, there's more business, or there's more sales or more clients coming in, or you deliver faster. After you deliver faster, then the business gets better. So if business gets better, you give them the promotion, and we give them the promotion, they get either more salary, and for them it's a growth, it's moving up the ladder. Things like that fulfill both, right? That's why it's nice, right? Everyone wins, right? Business wins, human wins. But the thing is, that's not always the case. The reason why I split them into 2, because there are often cases where you have to make a decision as a manager, or as a leader, or as a coach, which one do you prioritize? And there are times where, and unfortunately, nowadays, we have the habit of prioritizing business needs more than human needs. So I wrote down 3 statements. So I guess I can still do this because I don't need the slides for this. Let's just play a little game, okay? If it's called, if you feel me game, I'm gonna read out statements. I have 3 here. And if you're familiar with this dilemma, as a coach, as a leader, as a manager, if you resonate with this, just type 1 into the chat. Okay, it's the closest, I guess. So,
hey Shawn, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, sorry. So I'm just gonna read out 1. I have 3 statements here. I'm gonna read out each statement, and if you resonate with this statement, just type 1. Yep, exactly. Oh, thanks, Malvika. All right. First statement. We love it when our teammates are productive, but don't want them to burn out at the same time. So things like, so I wrote down what people would say: take a break, man, but remember the deadline's tomorrow. Okay? Okay, that's a lot of people. Second statement. We have that one team member that's damn good at his job, but a complete asshole though. Right? And it's like, hey, that's our rock star you're talking about. Which I've seen before. Yeah, I don't get along well with those kind of people. Oh, fuck me sideways. Anyway, sorry, shouldn't I say that? Third statement. I think this one's my favorite one because it happens a lot in my own team all the time. We want our features and products to be delivered fast and efficient, but preach about collaboration to create better outcomes and products. So how many man hours do you take again in total to deliver that? Oh yeah, even in tribeless, all the time. Yeah, trying to work, even in our own team, trying to work together to deliver something, and end up that You know what could have taken one person 1 day takes 5 people 2 days. Yeah. Don't know whether I even should be saying that. So I think, you know, it seems that there's a lot of one, so that's great. A lot of people are in the same position as me. It's something that I struggle with all the time, right? And push comes to shove, we actually, right now, in a lot of organizations and a lot of teams, we prefer to actually prioritize, like in the first statement, we prioritize the productivity, right? So if they burn out, well, at least you got more money, you got more bonus, you got more compensation. Or, you know, that's 1% is damn good at his job, right? But he's a complete asshole, right? Does he fit in the culture? Well, does it matter if he gets results? And the third statement is that, you know, we want our things to go fast, like a Chinese, we say, oi peng, oi lang, oi zhang, right? You want it to be nice, cheap, you know, nice, cheap, and beautiful, I think. Yeah. So meaning that no matter what, it's always like the best of everything. But that's not always the case, right? If you look at things now, we are in a position or kind of in a transition in our workplace whereby we don't always prioritize business needs anymore. That's why we talk about culture, we talk about, you know, we talk about culture, we talk about vulnerability, about psychological safety. And how this, and why I say this is because we care so much about it now, and also obviously why I love the Agile community, because I very much resonate with the work that you guys do, because it's about dealing with unpredictability. And unpredictability not just for business, but with people. Because in essence, people are very, very unpredictable, right? It's the only thing that we're reliable on, which is that we are predictably unpredictable, right? Or we're reliably unpredictable, if that's what. So I think that, you know, what I wrote here was like, business needs always gets a power up, and the human needs always gets a debuff, right? If you play games. And what always happens when human needs are neglected, it looks like this, right? I've seen this in my own workplaces, where I've worked at. I don't know if it resonates with you guys, but I've had team members who are perceived as unreliable just because they take sick leaves or any kind of leave, right? And they feel guilty about it. So I've had workplaces where people don't dare to take leaves, even if they could. Or if they take leaves, it gets a hit on their performance review. I've had team members being dismissed when, like I said, you know, like same like my experience at Pizza Hut. Get dismissed when we're not feeling good or we're upset about something. And when, for example, we are not delivering the results that we expected, we are immediately shamed in our own team. And these are what I've experienced before. So I think this is something that why I say we're in a transitional period, because what we've always valued before, which was hyper productivity, right, and competitiveness from the previous generation, is now no longer the case. We are slowly moving more towards being able to value mental and emotional well-being of the people we work with. Because even nowadays, I think we all agree, we don't want our teammates to burn out. We don't want our teams to burn out. Because we all know now, and we've seen the effects of it in the long run, it just doesn't work out. You lose more actually in the long run. In the short term, you benefit, but in the long term, it just really doesn't work out. So how we balance between business needs and human needs, that's a big question for me, right? So how we balance that, and our answer is empathy. So that's where finally empathy comes in the picture. Because if we've always been neglecting human needs, it's only because we lack the understanding of it. In every MBA, what's the first thing you learn? Right? It's always about either something along the lines of the economics, or along the tracking, or competitiveness, everything about business needs. Anyone can learn anywhere. But what about human needs? It's at the same time so universal, because I know that, or I feel that we all want the same things. We all want workplaces to care. We all want to work at workplaces where we feel cared for, that we feel seen, heard, that people can resonate with the work that we do, that we are not just working for working's sake, but really caring about work that is impactful. And for us to really understand, and yet the way we practice those values, the way we how people want to be seen, how people want to be heard, how people want to feel belonging. That's what's unique about all of us. That's what's different. The way that it works for us at Tribeless, or how we practice feeling seen, feeling heard, does not necessarily translate the same if I bring the exact same practices to another team. It doesn't always work that way. And that's just the nature of human needs. That's why it's so hard to understand. That's why it's complex. And that's why we believe in empathy, in using empathy to understand. Empathy, we define empathy at Tribeless. It's basically the capacity to see parts of yourself in everyone else. And what we mean by that, it's less about, like the conventional way of like, putting yourself in other people's shoes and things like that, but rather tapping into your own capacity to feel what other people, to kind of see that, I've been through that too, right? And I had this part of slides, I wrote this down, hold on. Yeah, it's like when there are times when we all feel disappointed. We can see, right? We feel disappointed when we fail, but we're really excited when we achieve something or fulfillment. When you see that, you can see that in others because we've been through that. And that's what we mean by empathy. Right? And how we can actually create these safe spaces for these uncomfortable conversations. Because conversations like this are not easy. I'm basically asking you, what do you mean by belonging? Right? What is your identity? Right? And questions like that have no right answers. Is there even an answer in the first place? So rather than trying to say, okay, if you practice empathy, immediately you will figure out the human needs of your team or your team, right? Which is A, B, C, and the way to fulfill those needs are like D, E, F. That's not gonna work. And I'm gonna tell you straight, I can't tell you sweet lies. I don't have any answers. But empathy is a way to start. Because when you truly take time to understand them, and really ask them those uncomfortable questions and to really explore that's how you can really be able to address those human needs. So the way that we do that at Tribeless is through the empathy box, right? This was kind of like a toolkit we created to facilitate difficult conversations. But the one I want to talk about today to kind of close off everything is these 5 cards. Right? These 5 cards are what we call our response cards. They're part of the component inside the empathy box, and I love my good friend Z. He's the one that invited me to the Agile retreat last year. And I like the way he phrases this 5 cards. He says that at the core of the 5 cards is being able to have coaching conversations anywhere, anytime, easily. And I thought that was a really nice way to frame it. So going back to the way, let's say, talking about how to use these 5 response cards in conversations for your own team, right? How does that work? So I'll go back to the beginning example, which was with the newest hire when she broke down during retrospective. This was something all of us in the team replied somewhere along those lines using these 5 cards, but I'm just gonna assume that I'm the only one that replied, okay? So it's like role play. So immediately after she broke down, the first thing we did, of course, was show some love. This is the first response cards. The first response card, which is show some love, is basically about showing, like we say, empathy, appreciation. So I even had to go back because we recorded our meeting. So I wrote down a shortened version of what each of us said. Right. And I remember, so the show some love card is about appreciation, acknowledgement, right? Allowing them to open up. It's less about fixing their problems or fixing about anything else, but just making them feel validated and heard. So I remember this was one of our other teammate that actually was her manager. She said, thank you so much for sharing that. It's not easy opening up to a team like this. I know you've told me before that you feel very uncomfortable crying in front of other people. So I really appreciate you, being willing to open up. And second thing, then immediately she followed by help me understand. Help me understand is about asking questions. And she asked the question, what are the current responsibilities that you have what about the current responsibilities that you currently have that makes you feel overwhelmed, right? And I remember her answer was something along the lines of, there was a lot of things she's doing for first time. There was a lot of things she don't know how to do. And why we focus on those kind of questions, whereby it's less about good question, bad question, because I don't believe that there's such thing as a good question or a bad question. All questions are subjective to the person that you're asking. But it's about following your curiosity. Asking questions that have no right answers. Those are what I feel effective and powerful questions, right? Questions that there are no right answers to. If I asked you, what university do you go to? That's obviously a right answer in your head, whether you like it or not. But if I ask you, what did it feel like to go through university? Totally different question. There's no right answers for that. And it's questions that focus more on the emotions. So, and she answered that one of us in the team, I think this was me, then we played the observation card. Observations are what we categorize as actions, behavior, character. And actions, behavior, it's as Asians, I feel that we observe things a lot and very often. We just don't really dare to say it out. And that's why when we share an observation card, it's an opportunity for us to basically highlight things that other people don't realize. And I remember this one was that we said, I think this was someone that I said, we haven't worked together that long, but it's clear that you put a lot of care and effort into the work that you do, right? You're a really responsible person, and I can see that you really make sure that you really want to make things perfect at the first time. That's sharing an observation, because she probably did not realize that she puts that much work, that much effort into the work that she does. What normally takes maybe 5 hours, she's probably taking a whole day or 2 days just to complete it, right? And that's an observation. Lastly, I wanted to mention one more thing. I know that right now it's in the period of COVID-19, so a lot of people are also asking, like, how do you actually do like body language and things like that online? I guess I would just very briefly say that observations are not just about body language, right? Although yes, online you can still see if there's video, the facial expressions, the hand movements, the back and forth. But the easier answer I can say is the language. How a person uses the things like always or never, should, could, have tos, or the way that they phrase it, right? Which is that, I just feel overwhelmed versus I think I'm feeling overwhelmed. The mindsets are very different just by the words that they use. And of course, I'm speaking from English language, so that's the best I know. But in any language, they have their own intricacies that if you think about it or choose to explore it more, that's probably the most powerful medium that you have available for you as a coach to be able to understand the mindset and be able to feel and empathize with your coaches or your team. Yeah, that's what I can briefly say just from my own experience. Anyway, last one is share and offer alternate perspective. And offer alternate perspective is not the advice card, right? Because it happens a lot. We've been holding space and hosting these sessions for so many years, and a lot of people mistake this for an advice, for just being able to tell people, I think you should do this. Hey, have you ever read this? You got read this book? You got watch this podcast? I tell you, this is what you should do. Why we say alternate perspective and not opinions? Because perspective is grounded in your own experience. It's something that you've been through that you can resonate, and it's less of an advice, basically telling people what to do, but about saying, hey, this is what I've been through. And one thing then the story that I brought up into that new hire was actually my Pizza Hut story. And I said to her that, I told her about my time at Pizza Hut, and I said, feeling overwhelmed, it's a very natural part of work life. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you that that's never going to happen again, right? But what I can say is that you'll get used to it. You develop the resilience. You develop that capacity to be able to deal with it and cope with it. And I think that's something that's really powerful, and really something that that now that you're opening up, it's something that you can do again and again. Yeah. So last one was the Go Wild card. So this response cards is when if any of your response don't fall into the first 4, then you use the Go Wild card. And this is the opportunity for you to step outside of the box in terms of what is typically expected of the relationship or the conversation, and be able to offer something. So go well, I remember, was at the end of retrospective. One of us offered to her, hey, do you want to just take a break, right? But next week, why don't we just sit down and let's just go through what you're working on now and see how we can help, how we can support you, and maybe clarify some things that maybe you're overworking or overthinking. And I think that was the kind of conversations that the kind of conversation that we have in our team at Travelers very regularly. And I only wish that I had that throughout my working life, right? Because my natural instinct, based on my experience, is to just say, wow, so easy cry, ah. Ayo, it's like, young people nowadays. That's my natural instinct, right? I was trained very typically in a very Chinese culture, very China man company, they call it, right? And the thing is that conversations like this always come in two ways, right? Either they happen very unexpectedly or they are very planned. Planned conversations are like one-on-ones, performance reviews, retrospectives, daily stand-ups. These kind of planned conversations, when you use these 5 cards, are great. They're something you can plan beforehand and then do like, okay, I'll just try and practice this. But what happens if it comes to you unexpectedly? Right? When suddenly you see like a colleague's like really, really angry or like really, really disturbed, or if you notice that they're gone into the toilet for like more than 20 minutes and he's definitely not taking it, and she's definitely, or he or she is not definitely taking a shit. I've had that experience before, of a colleague being gone for a long time because the person was crying in the toilet. I remember back then, I basically said, yeah, chill out lah, it'll be fine. But I also know that that was me being very dismissive. If I had these 5 response cards with me, or just in the back of my head, I probably would at least be able to hold space for that person to at least open up what she's going through, or to at least be there to listen. And I think that's what we don't get nowadays in the workplace. And so I'm so sorry I took up so much time because I did have slides, so I rambled a little bit long. I really apologize, guys. But I do want to close off by saying this. Like, let me open up my iPad. I think now that with all the working experience that I've had, and now being in a position of the CEO of my own company, which I'm very fortunate to have, I also know that the way that I've been treated before is not necessarily the way I want to treat the next generation of people. It's just a conscious choice of mine to not want to continue this cycle, right? To create a new kind of environment where if I accept people into my company, I don't want them to feel like working to them is just another 9 to 5. And I know that that's what, if they treat work with such importance, I know they don't treat it as a 9 to 5 either. But this comes with a lot of baggage, which is the emotional, the ownership and the emotions that come with it, right? And I choose to accept that. And so I feel that as leaders, we are in a position now to be able to actually change the environments in our workplace to be like that, right? To create environments whereby we can hold space for the people, that people feel welcomed, feel heard, feel belonging, actually, in the workplace. And that's why, I wrote all of this down and I gave this to my team for feedback. She's like, oh, what do you guys think? And I really love that my founder wrote, because she's also the one that helped me through my slides. She wrote this conclusion, which is that to thrive in an unpredictable world, we need to create consistent, intentional spaces to check in and align as a team, not just professionally, but emotionally too. I think that basically sums up the talk, right? We can't, as leaders, you can't get just the positives. You can't ask people, dedicate your whole life into this company, be loyal, but then treat them like shit at the same time, just doesn't work that way. So yeah, I think that's just my closing there, which is that we gotta be able, as leaders or as coaches, we gotta be able to bear both the negatives and the positives, right? Dedicate their whole lives and just treat them right. It means that if they are feeling like shit, thank you. Give them a break. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. Can everyone give Shawn a visual clap? Yay! That was, first of all, just really blown away by the genuineness of your talk and your honesty and authenticity. I think that's something a lot of us will really admire and try to practice ourselves, and bringing humanity in the workplace starts with us. We're going to have, Martin has been capturing some questions as we go along. We do have 10 minutes for questions. So if you think of any questions, pop them in the chat, but I do believe we've got some all ready for you, Shawn. Would you like to do some Q&A?
Yes. Like I said, I've actually preferred the questions. I'm so sorry I talked so long.
Not at all. That was perfect timing. And we loved your adaptability. I actually really like that you didn't have slides, because it meant we could connect more with your story. So Martin, over to you. Questions for Shawn from Peeps.
Hey, Shawn, just let me say, first of all, that amazing talk without the slides just came from the heart. So I really appreciate that. So a couple of questions have come through. One would be basically, so when we got new people in our team, especially in this COVID time, where you don't get to meet them, how would you build that rapport with team members and create that same safety? What techniques and strategies would you recommend to develop empathy with your new team members?
Yeah.
And that came from Ankit.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Ankit, for the question. I think obviously easy answers are things like, yeah, just hop on more calls with them and things like that. I think, and of course, another easy answer is kind of like what we do, which is we just play the empathy box with the new hire. But I think a more relevant answer that I can give is, don't be afraid to show them sides of the team, especially because they join a new team, right? Don't be afraid to show them sides of the team that you might feel that in a way that you might feel ashamed of. I guess that's the easiest way. Sometimes every team works differently, and to get the new hire to adapt to that is probably the easiest way, which is that any call that the team has, just invite them, right? Even if it's not relevant to her, it's not relevant to them at all. And then obviously whenever you check in on them, try to ask less about, of course, obviously ask about, how things are going, are you coping with the work, do you understand your own responsibilities, but also ask about how they're coping with the transition from let's say, where they were before, from their last job, or, going to a first job, or maybe something to a new role. That transition for them is probably what they're going through right now, either from a junior to a senior position, or from non-management to management. That kind of transition is probably weighing a lot on them. And I think that's something that, as a manager, just a very quick tip that you can probably ask about without using the box, because that's the most common story I know that I get also when it's new hires, which is transition. So ask them about that. Get them to talk about it, and don't solve their problem. If they say, oh, transition, or let's say, oh, this the new hires, I just find it very hard, figuring things out. Don't swoop in and give them answers, okay? Just be there for them and just let them talk. They'll be fine. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Ankit.
Cool. I actually have a quick question as well, if you don't mind, Shawn. So how do you allow or get like a leadership team to kind of allow the teams to create the space to have these conversations and be vulnerable? As you mentioned before, it's very much a conversation of deliver sometimes. So what techniques do you have that we could use with our leadership teams?
Definitely, I think if you have like these 5 cards, if you do have them, giving them these 5 cards, or even if you don't, just draw it out. Like, honestly, I don't really care. Just draw out, like, draw a love, draw a question, draw an eye, draw an exclamation mark, draw an asterisk, right? Then you have 5 cards. This is what we do online, actually. Even online in all the events that we do, we don't actually take out the real cards. We ask people to draw. because drawing makes it very cute. I don't have my drawings with me because I'm at my office, neither good internet. But yes, exactly. I mean, Lee Maini has the yeah, you have the drawing ones, exactly. Yeah. So we actually draw them out, right? And then that actually establishes an equal ground where when you set the rules of the conversation being that, okay, we can show love, we can ask questions, we can share observations, we can show perspectives. When you set that baseline, that is what I kind of guess, like my friend Z said, that it very easily creates coaching conversations, because then people naturally feel like, oh, okay, I can engage in this conversation in these 5 ways, right? And I think that's how the best way to build that vulnerability. And of course, one of them is that second thing being that don't penalize people or kind of neglect when people are trying to open up or to be vulnerable. Actually, you'd be surprised how easily we actually don't appreciate it when people are being vulnerable. Like when people say things like, oh no, I'm just having a bad day. Most of us, right, and this is a very common way of neglect or dismissal, it's just like, yeah, can one, let's just go and drink later. If they brought it up that they're having a bad day, they probably want you, if you don't ask them about it, they're probably still thinking about it, right? So I was asking them, oh, what's wrong, right? What happened, right? I think that's in itself very powerful, to give them that space so that they can be vulnerable.
Thanks, Shawn. We've got one here from Alina. How do you balance empathy, taking time with the team and the team deadlines?
Oh, Alina, thank you. One of the hardest questions I struggle with every day. Really good question. I think, and this happens very often in our own teams, right? Which is that sometimes we overwork for some weeks, and it ends up that we then some weeks we don't work a lot, and then that infringes on deadlines. Or sometimes because we collaborate and things like that. Like I mentioned, right, the biggest gripe in my own team, right, is that we all love collaborating, but hell, it takes a lot of man hours just to complete something. So to answer your question, how to balance that, what I found out that works well for our team is to be very clear about the deadlines and what is to be delivered, right, way in advance. So meaning like 2 weeks ahead at least, right? And when it's close to that, to just checking again, right? To basically, like when you want to hang out with your friend, let's say you schedule like to go hang out for coffee like a month in advance. 1 week before, a few days before, you're gonna ask them, hey, is coffee still on? Right? Is coffee still on the table, right? Are we still hanging out? Do the same thing for deadlines, because when they need it's kind of unfair for both you and also them, that if suddenly they are totally, for whatever emergency happens, that they want to drop everything and just address that personal thing, they still have the responsibility of communicating with the team. So it doesn't mean that they must like, oh, I don't care if your mother is in the hospital, you must still sit down here and complete your project, then only you can go. No, it's not like that. But more of like, okay, I see you have an emergency. What do you have left? What do you have now? Can you hand it off to someone so that they can do, right? Then it's like I owe you, in the future there's something that they can do back. Yeah. So it's kind of creating that environment whereby the whole team bears the responsibility. If one person is not able to, if the team, let's say for whatever reason, cannot meet, or one individual, often the case, right, is unable to meet that one thing, which then the rest of the tasks are dependent on, dependencies, right? To create that kind of culture where people can come in and go like, okay, I'll do my best to take over first, and things like that. Yeah. Hope that answers your question. Sorry, I still struggle with it too, okay? So I don't have a perfect answer to that.
No, I think that's great. Thank you, Shawn. I think the questions are getting even more interesting. So we've got one here from Rahul. How do you empathize with people you don't like or who don't like you?
Thanks for picking that good question, Martin. And thanks for the question, Rahul. Short answer, people we don't like are the people we feel most similar to us. So I hope that answers your question. But the long answer is that when we have a very instinctive reaction, or for whatever reason, let's say there's two cases, right? From what I've seen when you talk about people don't like you, is that either there's a built up baggage in that relationship between you and that person, or it's an instinctive thing. You know, like you first see them, you're like, I'm not gonna get along with this guy. Like, I don't know if you guys have that. I know I have that sometimes, which is that you just make eye contact and like, I think he hates me. And I think in both these cases, normally when it's an instinctive thing, often the case you are right in a sense that it is valid. Maybe you don't like him, he don't like you, but it probably won't be a bad thing to talk to them. Right? Because when we talk to them, more often than not, we'll find out about things about why we hate, why let's say why we don't like them, but also why we like them. Right? The biggest fall in terms of that is just that you don't talk to them in the first place, right? You're like, I don't think he hates me, so you ignore him, and then you keep ignoring him, or you keep not talking to him, or you assume he hates you, and then you talk to him, which then makes you have that kind of image that you hate each other more and more, and just builds, or just from the misunderstanding of not communicating in the first place. If there is an existing baggage in that relationship between you and that person, right? I have no easy answer for you. You just gotta sit down and talk it out, because that conflicts are actually the best opportunity to build empathy. Right? An example is that just only yesterday I was talking with one of my teammates, and we were actually figuring out one of the trainings we're delivering to a client 2 weeks later, right? I remember she brought out all the content and everything. I was just looking at it and I was like, I don't get it. What are you trying to achieve at this training? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And I know that in my mind, it was just that things were just going into my head. But rather than assuming and trying to fight, right, this is a conflict, right, because we are not agreeing on who delivers the training or what the training is going to be. Instead, I said, okay, why not? I'm sorry because I cannot understand this. I know that she created the training, right? I apologize because I cannot understand this training right now. Why not? I'll just let you handle it for now, and I'll get back to you to let you know how I can contribute to this project, because currently I'm lost. Right? And immediately after we end the Zoom call, I lie down on my sofa. I was like, that's why I couldn't get it. Simply because she was using different terms or the way that we describe our content in different words. That's it. Like, for example, instead of principles, she was using things like rules. And I thought she changed she changed everything. No, she didn't. She just used different words. And sometimes it's just things like that. And conflicts are really the best way. Because if you disagree, more often than not, that's the best time to be able to find why you disagree and how, and understand where actually you're both similar in terms of this disagreement. Yeah. Hope that answers the question. Thanks, Rahul.
Good question. Yeah. So another one, maybe controversial one. I don't know. Do you think Scrum Masters / Agile coaches are more empathetic than line managers?
Okay, can I think for a few seconds?
Sure. I guess it's kind of the concept of a manager versus servant leader, right?
I think definitely, I think about this question. If I think about from the perspective of training, I firmly believe that it's also kind of why I love being around Agile coaches and the Agile community, because the work that we do at Tribeless, which is about holding space for well-being and also for mental health, is very similar to how Agile coaches do for creating a space for teams to thrive. I think that's why I know that by training, Agile coaches are definitely more empathetic in general to others, especially to teams. But I think also that's the perspective from the other side, which is that as a manager, you know your team so much. It's kind of like being in a marriage. I don't know if you guys you're being in a long-term relationship. To a certain point, you and your girlfriend, if you've been together long enough, you start to assume a lot of things, right? You start to assume or kind of know I know she'll act that way. Oh, there'll be this like that. So that isn't about lack of empathy, but rather that it's just that there are a lot of very natural tendencies that we have or to just assume and expect about the other person creates this kind of blockers that make it very hard for us to actually empathize towards our own team, especially as managers, right? Managers of our own team, because you know all the idiosyncrasies. Like, let's say, for example, let's say my own team, I know. Let's say an example, I have John, I have Gary. I know John's gonna act this way. I know Gary's just gonna go for a smoke right now. Right? He takes a smoke break once every 3 times. So every time I see once every, let's say, 3 hours. So next time I see go out in the next 3 hours, I know he's gonna go for a smoke, but maybe he's not. Right? Maybe he's going out to meet a friend. Maybe he's going out to meet a client. I don't know. Right? But as a manager, it's like being in a long-term marriage. You know the team so much, or you assume it becomes that you start creating assumptions, which then become blockers to empathy. Right? I think that's I feel a more precise answer, but definitely as in general, as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, that's why I love being around this community, because naturally you guys are a lot more empathetic. At least I feel. So that's why I jive very well.
Thanks, Shawn. Just going to Steph, just to make sure, how many more minutes? We got a couple of more minutes.
We do have a couple more minutes. We finish at 5 past, then we have a 5-minute break, and at 10 past 2 Australian Eastern Time, or 10 past the hour your time, Kwang will be joining us from Singapore for Fresh, Fun, Effective Retrospectives. So we've probably got 5 minutes and then a 5-minute break before Kwang comes on. So last question.
Cool.
I'm excited for
Cool.
Kwang's session.
I guess there's a lot of there was a lot of chatter about remote working, and there's one here from, I think, Luston, if I've got his name right. How does empathy work for remote contractor teams? That'll be one question, and then we might ask you where we could find out more information if we wanted it. There's been some posts in the chat as well, but those are 2 questions. So the last one is remote teams. Yeah.
I think it's a mistake to I think when it comes to remote teams, to believe that quantity is better than quality. In a sense that the more calls you have with your remote team, the more empathetic or the closer your team will be. I think that's a very common misconception that happens even for us, right? We fell into the trap because Travelers used to be a fully analog company. We weren't digital at all. Then the pandemic hit, and then we went fully online. The team itself also struggled very much in the first few weeks, figuring out what's the best way to kind of hang out or to empathize and things like that. So that's why I guess the best way to kind of build empathy and to create that kind of strong team culture is to focus less on having more calls, but have more quality calls. So deeper conversations, lesser frequencies, right? That's very important. We are lucky because we have our own product, so we just naturally we just use our own product. We just have the empathy box. We just do it regularly once a month. For every time something happens in a team, there's a transition, and issues pop up, we just use the box. But I also know there's a lot of tools out there, right? Lots of tools, lots of opportunities. I know that sometimes you don't really need tools. If you had such a good team that's very well close knit already, creating that space is like, okay guys, it's not COVID-19. We're all in deep shit. Anyone everyone wants to talk, we're here for each other. There you go. Right? And then just make that space. Sometimes if your teams are close enough, that's all you need, right? But don't fall for my easy. Also another answer is don't fall for the typical conversational card game trick, right? A lot of conversational card games actually trap you into certain kinds of conversations which are not quality. Like we don't dive deep into understanding who they are as a person, but more about the superficial stuff, which actually doesn't serve the purpose of creating empathy. So don't fall into that. I guess that's also easy way. Not all games work, basically. Not all things are equal. That's what I found. Which also sounds bad coming out from my mouth because I have my own tool. Forget I said that. Never mind. Okay. Yeah. I think, do we have time for any more questions?
I think one more question is, if we want to find out more, there's been a couple of posts in terms of links to stuff. What's your best place for us to go and find out more?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky because I got my team here kind of like helping me out with the chat to answer. So like I mentioned, I gave this talk 1 month ago. So now to kind of distill everything and to make the slides, I wrote a Medium post. So you can like think, hey, thanks Gwen, or both Gwens. Yeah, I work in a team where there's 2 sisters. They're sisters each other, they work with each other. Yeah, the amount of fights we have are very common. Sibling fights. So Gwen Yi has posted the Medium post article, which is kind of like a condensed version of this talk. I apologize that I rambled a little bit, but yeah, that 6-7 minute article is probably the best way to just see a simplified version, and also with the slides photos of what I talked about today. If you want to talk about Tribeless, there's a bunch of the links that Gwen Lin has posted, the other sister. And obviously, don't look at my LinkedIn because I'm very inactive in my LinkedIn. Just email me directly. And my email is shawn@tribeless.co. So if you have any questions, or like we said, now we're using Shortcut, right, during the event. I'm also joining all the other day sessions because I'm really excited, especially for Quang's session. I need more fun retrospectives. So yes, email me or just use the organizer's ways of using Shortcut.